Hey everybody, it's the Robot here from Vespa Motorsport here in San Diego, California. So you probably stumbled across this video because you're either interested in the Liberty 50 or Liberty 150 scooter, or you already own one. In my past review, that's been pretty popular about the Liberty 150. I know it's sold a lot of people on this scooter. I kind of questioned the fuel capacity of this scooter. I know for a fact that it easily goes a little bit over 100 miles. The posted capacity of the fuel tank is 6 liters or about 1.6 gallons. And I know they're pretty difficult to fill up at the gas station because they have a very awkwardly shaped fuel tank on them. So today I'm going to pull the bucket out. I'm going to show you that awkwardly shaped fuel tank. And I'm also going to fill up the scooter. This is a brand new factory fresh scooter. Ironically, it does start because from the factory in Italy, they put a splash of fuel in it. So they still start. My guess is it's less than a quarter gallon, or maybe an eighth of a gallon, half a liter, something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to go through the effort to pull the tank out to find out exactly what's in there, but I want to see how much fuel we can put into this scooter. And also the posted capacity for the reserve. So when the little indicator on the dashboard comes on, they say you have 1 liter remaining, which is about a quarter of a gallon, which translates into about 20 miles. And I know for a fact that I've gone further on this scooter when the reserve light comes on. So I'm going to try filling up right to where the reserve light goes off and find out what quantity it takes to bring it up to that reserve level, because I think it's more like a half gallon or around 2 liters. So let's get right to it. I'm going to zip the underseat bucket out. We'll speed that up and it's about 6 or 8 screws to get the generously sized underseat bucket, and we'll be able to see the fuel tank. So now we've exposed the inner guts of the Liberty scooter. You can obviously see the motor and its components, wiring, hoses, cables, and so on. So you have the filler neck, you know about that. It's got this handy little tray that catches that overage if you do overfill it by a little bit, which is pretty easy to do. This is your fuel tank, and it's like a roto-molded plastic fuel tank. They've been very, very reliable fuel tanks. They're used on, exclusively on all the Piaggio and Vespa products. Unlike metal tanks, they never corrode or rust if you have moisture in the fuel, so I think it's a great thing. But the way they're able to get these large underseat buckets is have very uniquely shaped fuel tanks. So you can see there's like a module of it right here. This is your access for the fuel pump, and there's electrical connector for the pump in there and the fuel line. You got your fuel level sender, which is a rod that has a float in it. It's about that tall. It will pull out, and you can, that's what electronically sends the fuel level to the gauge on the dashboard. It's got a wiring that goes to it. And then the tank kind of follows towards the back of the scooter on the right side, and then it gets a little larger towards the very tail end of the scooter. You can't really see it. It's kind of behind where this battery sits. The unique characteristic of this tank is it's high here, and it also has a high point here, but it's low in the middle. And the way they equalize the air pressure between the two is with this hose right here. There's a hose that connects to the filler neck and routes all the way to the very top of the rear tank. And as what I find happens is you're filling up the tank, the fuel pump stops, and then you put no more fuel in it. Well, you let it settle for 30 seconds, and the air pressures will equalize and the fuel level will go back down. So I have a lot of customers say, well, I don't see all the bars on my fuel level gauge. It's one shy, even though I filled up the tank and I visually saw that the fuel was right up to the bottom of this green filler neck. It takes a little while for the fuel to equalize. So if you want an absolutely full tank, you got to, pretty much give it a little bit of time and wait. But typically, when I'm at a gas station, I want to be pretty quick about it. So I'll sacrifice that last quarter gallon or liter unless I'm doing a long trip. So let's get right to it. Right now, I turned the key on. The low fuel light is on, and there's no bars on the little fuel gauge. So I'm gonna keep on adding fuel. I'm gonna measure it in with a graduated cylinder and see how much fuel it takes to bring it up to the point where the low fuel light comes on. And I suspect it's gonna take more than 1 liter. So now this is the full 2 liters. So a little bit more than a half gallon. And keep in mind there was a little bit of gas in the tank, enough to start the scooter from the factory. And I'm gonna let it sit here for about a minute and see if the gauge comes up. So I've now added 3 liters, or a little bit more than 3/4 of a gallon, to the fuel tank, and we now display 5 bars out of the 7 bars. So I would say that's, you know, definitely more than 3/4. I don't think that's the case. So I definitely shot way past the reserve capacity. I suspect the reserve capacity was somewhere between about 1.5 to 2 liters, because the gauge does drop quite a bit after that. I'm gonna see how much more gas it takes after these 3 liters to bring the fuel tank all the way up to the filler neck. So now with 4 liters, I show a full tank, so all 7 bars are on. So showing a full tank, I let it settle for a little bit, cycle the ignition for a new reading, but it's not quite all the way up to the filler neck. So I'm gonna see how much more. So I'm gonna add a 5th liter to the fuel tank. So there's 5 liters of gas, or a little bit more than 1.25 gallons in there. I'm gonna shake it around a little bit. It's getting pretty close to the filler neck. And of course it's still at a full tank according to the gauge. And I'm gonna pour 1 last liter. I've even given the scooter a little wiggle, just and it's still going down. I see it come up the filler neck and then still go down, and I still probably have, it's a little bit less than, and at this point we have about a 1/2 liter remaining. So I was able to put 5.5 liters into this tank. So I'm doing the reverse now with the aid of energizing the fuel pump and a special test hose I have. I'm gonna drain the tank until the reserve light comes on, then drain it until the fuel pump can no longer pick up any fuel. And we'll see how much fuel will drain out of the tank. So with 4 liters removed, only 2 bars remain on the gauge. That's 2 of the 7 bars. So about a little over a gallon, you're only gonna show you've burned through 5 of those 2 bars. So now I've dropped another 1/2 liter out, so I'm at 4.5 liters, and now I only have 1 bar showing. I'm gonna pull another 1/2 liter out. So now, with 5 liters removed from the fuel tank, which is just about 1.25 gallons, a little over 1.25 gallons removed, we have no bars displaying, and the low fuel light is on. All right, so let's see how much more will drain out of the fuel tank with the reserve light on. So somewhere in between 5.25 and 5.5 liters was removed. Prior to the trigger that low fuel light on. So at this point, the fuel pump is no longer pumping. I don't want to run it too long dry. And that's pretty much all that's going to be all the usable gas that's taken out of the tank. There probably still is gas remaining in the tank, but it's not usable fuel level, because that is for you know, the fuel pump pickup doesn't quite go to the bottom. So we're right at another 1/2 liter. So the tank holds exactly 6 liters. So my conclusion to this, what's posted in the owner's manual is exactly what this thing holds. For some reason, I always thought that reserve was a little bit more. Maybe it is a little bit more than a liter, but I drained exactly 6 liters out of this fuel tank. So 1.6 gallons is a total usable capacity of the fuel tank on a Liberty 50 or Liberty 150. Liberty 50 is going to have the exact same setup because it's a fuel injected motor. Obviously it's going to go a lot further on that 1.6 gallons, being a 50cc that's easily gets 100 miles per gallon. Being a 150, your range does vary completely on how you ride it. So, you know, this scooter typically would get anywhere from 75 up to about 90, maybe even 100 miles per gallon if you ride it real easily. So, you know, you have a typical range of between 100, 150 miles with the built-in tank that's on here. And the reserve, my guess is about 1 to 1.5 liters is remaining once that light comes on when you're riding around. So keep in mind, probably do need to pull over within 20, 25, at the very most 30 miles to refill the fuel tank. So if you fill the fuel tank all the way up to the filler, allow it to equalize, you get the full 1.6 liters, or you get the full 1.6 gallons or 6 liters out of the scooter. Hope that wasn't too boring. It was kind of just a nerdy video I want to do for myself, just for curiosity of what these hold, because I've had a lot of customers come in and say, oh, I can't get the fuel gauge to read all the way to the maximum, or I only add a gallon at a time to the fuel tank, and I just wanted to figure out what the real capacity is. Thanks for watching. It's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. Until next time, Robot here.